We have a familiar face back today, my good friend Alexi Lalas. Alexi, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I am back. I enjoy being here, which is why I'm back. I like to think that you enjoy having me, and it's not out of some contractual obligation. But I do return performances for people that I like and people that interest me. And you and your show is certainly one of those situations. So all sorts of stuff to talk about here when it comes to what's happened, and I guess what's going to happen.
Yeah, you are always welcome back, my friend. We always have a good time talking some USMNT for the good or the bad, depending how they're playing, which is what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, the Gold Cup wrapped up almost not too quite 2 weeks ago, a little over a week ago,
Mhm.
and the USMNT made it to the final, which a lot of people thought might not happen after the first two friendlies didn't look very good. They thought, okay, this is a wounded duck. This is not good. This is going to crash and burn out. But they found a way to make it to the final. We'll get more into the specifics, but how did you feel about the USMNT's performance in the Gold Cup?
Yeah, so now with a little bit of hindsight and some time, like you said, since it's over, I think.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you give it a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are less than 200 subscribers away from hitting 8,000, and our goal is to hit that number by the end of July. With less than 2 weeks to go, I know we can hit that goal. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and hit that little bell notification so you never miss a video. Now, back to the video.
Some of the reality and maybe the perspective, and we've talked about this before, where sports are not necessarily conducive to having perspective or being rational, and that's okay. I like that about it. But when we are looking at this team in light of what just happened with the Gold Cup, but also pushing it forward to what's going to happen next summer, look, I can be as grumpy and as cynical and as critical as anybody out there. Raise my hand. But I do think that in a certain way, they left the team in a better position than when we started. And sometimes we forget, and you remember what it was like at the beginning of that tournament and the angst and the apathy really that was associated with this team. Now, did everybody come out of that Gold Cup with a renewed sense of optimism that we are going to win the World Cup? No. And who knows how many of those players ultimately are going to be a part of it. But I do think that in general, this was a positive and a move forward. And maybe there is a renewed sense that this team is worthy of our time going forward. And I think maybe the biggest winner coming out of this will be Mauricio Pochettino, in that he kind of laid down the law. And this is, almost a flag in the ground type of moment that everything else can kind of be measured by. And some of the messages that he sent and some of the growth and the evolution that he even had within the tournament, I think it's going to serve him well going forward as we get into next summer. And I do think there will be some, almost an inflection point type of moment this summer that will inform what happens. I mean, even in the next camp, I'm really interested to see who comes into the next camp. But I think maybe next summer, when things are going hopefully well for this team, you might be able to look back and say, this is where he learned that lesson, or this team learned to establish this is what we are.
Well, you brought up an interesting point about Pochettino kind of changing the attitude of the team, or just the norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know exactly how Greg Berhalter was running things when he was there, but based on the way things kind of played out this summer, it felt like the players had a lot of say in what they did and what they didn't do. Like you just said, Pochettino put his flag in the middle of the ground saying, hey, this is how it's going to be. Do you think do you actually think these players are going to conform to what he's trying to do? Or do you think there is going to be some backlash and some resentment?
No, I think that he is going to, reintegrate the players that weren't there, either by choice or just because they were playing, or even maybe, who knows, some of them that he wasn't even going to call in. They are going to be reintegrated, but they are going to come into a team that I think has fundamentally changed. And I think, the way that he kind of handled himself and got through that, that whole Christian Pulisic thing, and again, the outside noise that was asking, I think, a legitimate question as to why should we care about this team if it looks like, whether it's the truth or not, doesn't matter, but it looks like to a lot of people, and the perception out there is they don't. And by the way, this is not This is not a shot against Christian Pulisic, because let's be fair, from a national team perspective, until his decision this summer, I don't think there was ever any question as to how much he cared, or that, more importantly, when he got on the field, he delivered the goods. But I do think that this might spur Christian Pulisic maybe to have the best version of him going forward, because he knows he got kind of what he wanted. And others that weren't there coming back in, it wasn't a situation where they went out in the group and it was a complete failure. Ultimately, they lost to a better Mexican team, but there were some players that came about. And again, I think the mentality, and this goes back to Pochettino, he doesn't care where you play, doesn't care how much money you make, doesn't care how famous you are, doesn't care who you're dating or married to or anything like that. All he cares about is that you care and that you can do the job on the field. Now, there will be some players that are just more talented. No matter how much you care, it's sometimes hard to level up relative to somebody's talent as much as you care. But I do think that there is a nice, vein that has now been established with this team, that we're not going to be Spain. We're not going to be France. We are going to be almost kind of traditionally American in the way that we play. Talked about the set pieces, talk about countering attack. And traditionally we've had great goalkeeping. Haven't necessarily seen that yet, but all of those types of things, I think he realizes that's the surest way for us to have success come next summer. And you got to buy in.
I agree. And I want to talk to you about camp standouts and maybe some underperformers in a bit. But as far as like Pochettino, I call this his core team right now. These are Pochettino guys. These are guys that I think Pochettino has had the most time with. He's familiar with. He likes, like Diego Luna, obviously, I think has really shot up as one of his favorite players. Do you think that Pochettino having more of a connection with these guys is going to, I don't want to say necessarily alienate some of these regulars we've had over the years, but I'll be honest with you. I think that there's going to be in 2026, when the roster comes out in less than a year, there's going to be some surprise people missing from that team just because they don't really mesh well with Pochettino.
Yeah. I mean, the advantage that these players had that were in camp for the Gold Cup, it can't be understated. It day in and day out, living and working with Pochettino. And so he sees exactly who you are. And, yes, ultimately it's about winning soccer games and being able to kick the ball. And you certainly have to have that. But, with all things being equal, if he looks at a player and says, you know what, I love the way, I'll tell you a quick story. Maybe this will help illustrate it. Before the World Cup in 1994, before you were born and a lot of your listeners and viewers were around, we all worked to just be on that. At that point, it was the 23-man roster. And in, I guess, what would have been the end of May of 1994, getting ready for a June World Cup, the final cuts were made. And I'll never forget, one of the last players to make the team, if you will, was Joe Max Moore. Joe Max Moore, most competitive player that I've ever met. And years later, I talked to our coach, Bora Milutinovic, and I asked him about those final cuts. And he told me that he made the decision on Joe Max Moore after watching him in one of the final training sessions play a game of soccer tennis. And the competitive nature of Joe Max Moore, that's what pushed him over. That's what gave him the belief that this is a guy I want on my team. Because there were maybe guys that were as good or better when it comes to talent, but nobody was more competitive. Nobody would do the things that you asked, and nobody would run through a wall more so than Joe Max Moore. And so, those types of things, they are important. Again, if you are just head and shoulders above somebody else in talent, it doesn't matter how much fight and spirit or whatever word you want to use. But some of those ultimate decisions, I think, to your point, next summer are going to be made in Pochettino's head because, hey, I remember when I saw that player in this training do that, and I want that on my team. And that showed me how much that player wants to be here. So, again, you can't underestimate the value of being in camp for, what was it, over a month, playing in a tournament that went successfully for the U.S. team, and certainly, given the expectations coming into it, exceeded expectations. So I think they really benefited. A lot of those players really benefited, and we'll see how it manifests going forward. I mean, they have 8 to 10 real friendlies before the World Cup kicks off. So these games coming up in September in this next international window, it's going to be really interesting who he brings in and I guess who he doesn't bring in.
Yeah, one of the frustrating parts, though, about this, I call it missed opportunity for some guys, is that while there are going to be 8 more games before the World Cup, you're not going to ever have an experience where you play 8 games together through an entire month to build that chemistry, which I don't think you can understate. Because, some of these guys don't know each other. They certainly don't know the coach. So, Coach Poach, right? So you having 8 games to learn the system, to learn just who he is, like know who get to know him. Because I think that's important as well. That is what I'm going to take away from the summer is just a missed opportunity for a lot of guys, especially with the year that's coming up. But as far as who performed well, because that's another thing, right?
Sure.
I think there was a lot of people that disappointed, but there was a lot of guys who I did think took a big step in the right direction heading into 26. Who are some people that you came away impressed with during the 2025 Gold Cup for the USMNT?
Okay, so I'm a little disappointed, and I'm sure that the player is disappointed that Zach Steffen got hurt yet again, because I do think that had he been healthy, he would have been the starter throughout the Gold Cup. Matt Freese took the opportunity, and while he had that one viral moment of saving the penalties, and I'm not discounting how important that was, he never really controlled the game and stood on his head and had that game. I mean, I don't fault him for any of the goals except for the one mistake that he made in the group stage, but I don't think he endeared himself enough where I'm comfortable saying, hey, this is a guy that's going to start over Matt Turner. But don't get me wrong, there is a competition when it comes to goalkeeper right now. That's a problem position right now for this team and for Pochettino. I'm on the record as saying that I was never the biggest Chris Richards fan, but I think that he has completely matured, and I am now 100% convinced that not only the player and the seriousness in which he plays, but you couple that with just a wonderful personality. I hope he never loses that smile. For better or worse, it's going to be old man Ream unless somebody else comes along, and he's still great with the ball. He understands what he's good at and what he's not good at, and we all get that, but it is a little strange that, again, less than a year away from the World Cup, and there's not a single other center back that I would be comfortable going with. So that's the tandem, and knock on wood, they stay healthy. I don't think that either of the outside backs, and you can yell and say Max Arfson that's not his position. I don't think either of the outside backs did themselves any favors, and they certainly didn't even come close to approaching what Serginho Dest, knock on wood, hopefully is. Even Serginho Dest at an 80%. Or Jedi over there on that left-hand side. Midfield's interesting, with Berhalter coming in. Tyler Adams had a very quiet tournament. If Tyler Adams is that type of player come next summer, then we got problems. And so I hope it's just he's still getting back into it. He wasn't 100%, whatever it ends up being, but that cannot be the Tyler Adams that we see going forward. He let the game happen as opposed to making the game happen, and that was a little concerning going forward. But I hope, again, it's just an aberration here. I don't think, like, I didn't even know half the time when Luca Del Toro was on the field. Johnny obviously got hurt. Quinn Sullivan had a moment in the summer, and then was like, okay. Malik obviously is one of the big winners, as is Diego Luna. And Malik we've seen before, but he kind of stepped up, and I don't think he's a finished product, and I don't think that he's the greatest player the U.S. has ever seen. But from a 10 position, I guess that's who we're going with, and I'm okay with that. Diego Luna is the interesting one, because where do you actually play him if you have everybody healthy, and where's that starting 11 position? Because I don't think he's taking Christian Pulisic's position on the left. Musa may be the odd man out when it comes to going forward. Obviously, Gio Reyna, those types of players who might not ever get back into the national team. We may have seen the last of them going forward. And then up top, it's just a constant question as to who it's going to be. And, Agyemang, he did what he did, and there's wonderful moments of work and stuff that you don't see. Got a couple of goals, but if we're going to the World Cup next summer with Agyemang, then again, it's a problem. But then who's next? All right. Bellingham can't get healthy. And so Pochettino really doesn't know what he is. And we don't really know what he is. And he hasn't, for someone that's been given the keys to the castle, he hasn't really taken a hold of it. Obviously, Pepe's hurt. Sargent, he just doesn't seem to like right now, but who knows a few months from now if he's playing in the EPL and stuff like that. So anyway, all in all, there are some positives. I definitely think that there will be players that not only are brought into this next camp, but will ultimately make it to it's a roster of 26 next summer for the World Cup.
Yeah, so as far as Matt Freese, I agree with you that he hasn't locked the starting position down, but I think he's definitely in the driver's seat. Now, that doesn't mean that Matt Turner can't take it back, but if I had to put it, I would say like 60% likely Freese is a starter, 40% likely that Matt Turner's a starter. And Matt Turner, honestly, has had a bad run of luck.
Yep.
He just recently got a transfer to Lyon, and then they get relegated to the second division. So he's not going to even be playing first division football unless.
No, I think they're okay now, right? I think they're okay with that. I think they went back the other way, but it still doesn't matter. Like to your point,
yeah.
Matt Turner has not been playing soccer, and that's a problem. It's amazing. It's blowing my mind that we even have to think about this when it comes to goalkeepers.
Well, yeah, because that's the most important thing. Goalkeepers have to play. You know, I remember in 2014, Julio Cesar was at I want to say Queens Park Rangers. And he wasn't getting any playing time. They got him a loan to Toronto FC. He played like 8 games, and then he was a starting goalkeeper for Brazil. You have to play if you're a goalkeeper. You cannot be a backup and expect to start for your national team, especially in a World Cup. You just
it'd be one thing if he wasn't playing, but then every time he came into the national team camp, he did great. I'm talking about Matt Turner, but that's not the case right now.
No.
And again, this is goalkeeping, a traditional position of depth, and more importantly, of competition. And so, again, Zach Steffen just and we saw him. He had a really good game over the weekend. And so, hopefully he's back from a physical perspective. He got his surgery, and so he's back on the field playing. So who knows? Maybe he gets called in again and challenges both Matt Freese and Matt Turner. But it's wide open when it comes to goalkeeping.
Yeah, I just wonder if he'll have enough opportunity time-wise to do it, just because, like you said, there's only 8 games left. That's all, he's making up for a lot of lost time. Now, as far as center back, Chris Richards, incredible. I think he took a huge step in the Gold Cup. That's what we expected him to play for the USMNT, is like he was playing for Crystal Palace the last 2 years, playing very well. He finally did the same thing for the USMNT. Tim Ream, man, if you told me 3 years ago that Tim Ream was going to be the starting center back in 2026, I would have said you're crazy. There's no way. He's not even going to be playing soccer anymore, is what I'd be saying.
Hey, by the way, Tim Ream would have said the same thing to you.
Exactly. But, it's not his fault. There's just not a better alternative, right? There's no one else, at least not the one that's took the mantle.
Yeah, when Miles got hurt, I think that really set him back. He's never really been the same player, because that would have been kind of the player that I would have put in that position had he. When I extrapolated it out before he got hurt, and then obviously he's just not the same player.
No, I agree. And, you would have thought that Mark McKenzie maybe would have been able to seize that opportunity, but he hasn't.
Nah,
he always
they're all
interchangeable.
Terrible. They're all.
Yeah, exactly. Now, as far as people that stood out to me, because I have a couple that really stood out, and then obviously one that did not stand out to me. I thought Malik Tillman probably had the best camp as far as what we had seen from him previously from the USMNT, always wanting more, never delivering. And it's a rare opportunity when you have a guy who is the Eredivisie player of the year and then never actually does anything for the red, white, and blue. You're kind of like, okay, well, who the hell is this guy? Where's the guy that's lighting it up for PSV? He finally showed up this summer. He did very well. I'm, like you said earlier, comfortable with him being the number 10. I have no worries. I think that if he continues to play like this, we will be fine. Now, as far as Diego Luna, I thought Diego Luna had a great camp outside of the Mexico game. I think he kind of shrunk in the big opportunity of the big game. But I don't want to kill him for one game, obviously, because he had a lot of other good showings that were promising, right? And he obviously has showed a lot of heart and grit that a lot of the other guys haven't showed this entire time that he's been part of the cycle. So I think those two guys had a great camp overall. And the guy who had the worst camp for me is Patrick Agyemang. He scored 2 goals, but the context, to those goals is that, they weren't against the best competition. And I understand that you can't help who's in front of you. You have to just play your game. But honestly, Alexi, I think about Josh Sargent, man. If he was here playing against these teams, giving him one more chance, I think he would have he would have had better games, better production in the Gold Cup than what Patrick Agyemang's had.
Yeah, I think the Agyemang experiment, the reason why I think a lot of people are talking about him, and I'll be the first to raise my hand, that we talked about him a whole lot this summer when it comes to our Fox production, is because nobody has stepped up in a well, I guess not necessarily perfect, but a better world. We're not even talking about Agyemang because we have 2 or 3 players already that are better, that have proven they're better. But that's not necessarily the case. And I'm not saying that whether it's Sargent or Pepe or Balogun, I guess those would be the 3 right now, whether it's those 3, they're not better than Agyemang, but they haven't. Again, I mean, my kingdom for a Josie Altidore or a Brian McBride or an Eric Winalda, or list goes. Hey, I mean, for a Brian Ching or something like that. These are the types of players that actually obviously put the ball in the net, which is the most important thing. They occupy defenders. And at times, Agyemang, to his credit, did that and did a whole lot of dirty work. But there's a rawness to Agyemang, still, by the way, 24 years old. So he's not like a young player, that I'm not sure if that goes away. Now, who knows? He's going to get this move. Maybe he becomes a better player. But, we've kind of seen this before with someone like Daryl Dike, for example, that had that move, and then he got injured, and it didn't work out. So I'm, knock on wood, he'll get better with this move. But all these guys, they got to either get healthy or they got to get a whole lot better in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and I think I saw your list on your show, your ideal starting 11, and I want to say that you had Ballo starting up top, and this is just as of right now.
Yeah, just because and again, maybe I am nostalgic for when he burst on the scene and everybody's like, oh, this is going to be great. And then he can't get healthy and had a long period out injured. And again, we haven't seen him. And so maybe my glasses are fogged by history. Yeah. So I had Balogun up top. I had Pulisic on the left. I had, like you said, Malik Tillman as a number 10, if you will. On the right, I still had Weah. I like the speed that he brings, and I think there's been nobody that's more consistent out there. I tried to get Luna on the field, and maybe I could substitute him out for somebody else out there. And maybe I even put him in if we're playing a game where we have a lot of the ball. Maybe I even put him in as one of the 3, because my 3 in the midfield were, like I said, Tillman, McKenzie,
Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie, I think.
Yes, Tyler and Weston McKennie. Yeah. Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams in the midfield. But again, if Tyler Adams isn't there, who knows? Maybe I put a Luna in and maybe play a more attacking type of midfield there. So something like that could happen. And then as obviously Jedi and Dest on either side. We just mentioned Richards and Ream, and then I think at this point I have Turner just because he's the incumbent going forward. But a lot of this can change, and who knows what happens again with these next couple of games or these next 4 games against Australia and Japan and South Korea and Ecuador.
Yeah. Well, as far as Luna getting him on the pitch, I had a pretty similar starting 11 to you, just a little different. So I had Pepe up top because I think Pepe's going to run away with it at PSV now that he is the definitive starting 9. I think he's going to have a great season. I think that he's probably going to be in the best form when 2026 rolls around. Okay. But my only change other than that would be put Pulisic on the right side, which he already plays at Milan, because Rafael Leao plays on the left side, and then put Luna on the left side, which is his natural position where he normally plays anyway for the USMNT. So
my only problem is that the Weah type of speed is very different, and I think plays well off of, and I'm not saying Christian Pulisic is slow, but he's a very different type of one-on-one player than Weah, who just, kind of pushes it by you and he's gone. And I like that threat, and I like that asymmetrical type of imbalance, if you will, on the other side, as opposed to a Luna and a Pulisic that I kind of see playing in the same type of way. And from a physical perspective, obviously they work hard, but they're not bringing anything in terms of their size.
Well, with Dest and Jedi being absolute speed demons, right?
Yep.
Both of them
there
are.
You go.
But do you think that could alleviate that with
That's
Weah,
fair.
take him out?
That's fair.
Because
They
they
start
obviously
pulling inside a little bit and have those overlaps and stuff. And again, you got to have the ball. And one of the biggest problems in that final against Mexico wasn't just that they lost. It was that they lost and they had very little possession of the ball. And so one thing, if you're counterattacking, and they didn't even have the speed to counterattack in those transition types of moments. So that's a problem. But if the U.S. isn't going to be able to possess the ball against a team like Mexico, that's definitely a problem, especially when you're trying to overlap outside backs. If you don't have the ball, it's very difficult to do that.
Okay, so Gold Cup is behind us. All right. I would say we're officially heading into the 2026 World Cup. Like that, we're less than a year away. This is the next big thing. Friendlies, in between, but this is the next big thing.
Yep.
How would you, at this moment, rate Pochettino's performance?
I'd give him a B. I mean, if I could it have been better? Certainly. Obviously, Nations League, a disappointing final, but still making the final at a time when a lot of people thought you weren't going to make the final. I do think that, some of his substitution patterns and decisions, I think, leave a lot of people scratching their head as to when he makes them, who he makes, and how that impacts the game, which is really the only thing as a coach you can do during a game. Most of your work's done before the whistle. And then, the strategic moves that you make, that's kind of how we judge coaches in an in-game type of situation. And he took a long time. Maybe it was by design. And again, I think that there is a long-term type of view to some of the decisions that he made within a tournament. And so serving two masters where, yeah, we kind of want to win the tournament, or and in this case, at the very least get to the final, because it shows that we're exceeding expectations of a lot of people coming into the tournament. But I also want to try some things that are going to give me the information in order for us to do well next summer. That's not always an easy thing to do for a coach. And I think he actually did a pretty good job of doing that. And it doesn't mean that in the moment there aren't people that are scratching their heads. But yeah, so, I think a solid B. But again, this is a guy that's never coached internationally. And I think what was disappointing to me at times was to hear his surprise and amazement at the realities that we all know when it comes to American soccer and that he should have been aware with. I mean, if you're surprised and amazed that the U.S. national team playing a game in the U.S. oftentimes as a home game is actually an away game, then you haven't done your homework and you haven't done your research. And so I get learning on the job, but again, you were hired a year and a half before the World Cup. You got to hit the ground running. You got to have this stuff already in your bag as you're going along. So that was a little concerning to hear some of his, like I said, moments of surprise that, hey, this is American soccer on and off the field in 2025 going into 2026.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people were frustrated with, like you said, lack of substitutions, maybe even what he's doing when he's not coaching this team, meeting up with players, talking to them, socializing with them, just trying to build relationships and keep a keen eye on what they're doing. But I don't really think I honestly think after what we learned about Christian Pulisic that the narrative he doesn't care kind of dies a little bit, man, because if he didn't care, why would he care if Christian Pulisic plays the two friendlies and leaves or doesn't play the two friendlies and comes? If he didn't care, then that would be no big deal to me. Okay, yeah, sure, do whatever you want. Come whenever you want. I don't care. What's the matter? I think that he, like you said earlier, he's sticking his flag into the ground. He's trying to build a culture. He's trying to say, hey, this is a team effort. This isn't one person. This is a whole collective thing. Now, obviously, there is some things he left on the table, like you said, maybe some things he can do better that you kind of would think would be common sense, right? But to be fair to him, he's never coached international ball before, the national team ball. This is his first gig. So I'm not. Some people are ready to jump ship. I'm not there yet. I mean, I'm definitely would like to see more improvement. But how many people? What do we watch that you don't want to see more improvement? Everybody should improve, right? So I'm not ready to get the pitchforks out yet, but if these friendlies come in the fall and they're concerning, then we'll see what happens. But
yeah. Look, to your point, we all improve, no matter how experienced you are, or old you are, or how many years you played. You're still improving. Now, sometimes it's incremental, but I think you're also letting him off the hook a little bit. And this is a guy that's being paid, $6 million a year. This is a guy who was brought in in a short-term capacity. He understands that. We understand that. Everybody understands that after the summer of 2026, he's gone, and he's going to probably have lots of opportunities. So you need to get this done. All right. All of the anger over, Greg Berhalter, and I think the excitement over hiring somebody with the cachet and the sexy name that is Pochettino. All right, that comes with responsibility and heightened expectations. And I think he understands that better than anybody. So again, yeah, I'm okay with you progressing and learning. And ultimately, let's be honest, he's just going to be judged on next summer. We can scream and yell about everything that's happening right now, but he's going to be judged on next summer. So you better be ready next summer. And there can be no excuses. You can't say, oh, I didn't have enough time, or, oh, the American soccer system is screwed up, or anything. Like, no, that doesn't work. You gotta bring it next summer, and you got to do things that we haven't seen before. And again, in not just a World Cup, but a home World Cup, you got to leave the situation in better shape than when you got it. And whatever that looks like, could look like wins, losses, whatever it ends up look like, at the end, when that final whistle blows for the U.S. team, whether it's 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, 8 games, who knows? You need to be looking at this team, but more importantly, I guess, this sport, and saying, yeah, you pushed it forward.
Okay, so I got asked an interesting question like 2 weeks ago. I'm going to ask you the same thing.
Sure.
About Pochettino. If you had the power to fire him right now, but here's the catch. If you did fire him right now, you would not be able to pick his replacement. It would be the unknown. Like it would be someone else in someone else's hands to hire his replacement. With what he's done so far, would you keep him or would you get rid of him?
Ooh, that's a good question. But I don't get to hire the next person.
You do not get to a say or to decide who the next hire is going to be. It's in someone else's hands. You just get to decide if he keeps his job.
Yeah. Wow. If I can't name the next person, it's very difficult for me to fire him. So no, I wouldn't do that. I will say that I think that there are, I don't know, let me see. Jim Curtin, for example, is out there. I mean, I think Jim Curtin understands the American player, and whether that American player that has grown up since they were a kid in the system in the United States, or that's an American player that's a dual national, or somebody that's grown up, that doesn't matter. I think Jim Curtin understands what the American player is. Again, somebody who's never coached internationally. So I think that there are options out there, but yeah, if I don't get to name that that next person, then I wouldn't do anything right now. And I think that it's unless say there's no qualifying right now. So unless this was going in the complete wrong direction from a qualifying process, there's no emergency, there's no panic, other than the possibility of not doing well that next summer. And if you at this point believe that we are in jeopardy of really screwing the you-know-what next summer when it comes to the World Cup, then yeah, of course you make a change.
Yeah, I think that I would hold off just because, like you said, the unknown could be scarier than what you already you're comfortable with, right? So I agree with that. Final question for this one is 2026. After everything we talked about, everything you've seen, digested, couple weeks past Gold Cup, do you feel any better today about the 2026 World Cup than you did 1 year ago when we fired Greg Berhalter?
Yeah, I feel more, well, I feel better than I did at the beginning of the Gold Cup. I think the Gold Cup did help not assuage, well, maybe assuage some of my concerns and worries when it comes to this team. There's still plenty of them out there, and I still worry that we're not going to grab a hold of this incredible opportunity that is next summer. But I'm feeling a little bit more bullish, and that's a good thing, because we've talked about the ramp over the last, I don't know how many years since we got this World Cup, and the ramp's getting shorter and shorter and shorter, but it's still a ramp, and any type of ramp, it's about momentum. And we had very little momentum before the Gold Cup. I think there's more momentum now, and if we can build on that momentum and get more and more positive and more excited going into next summer, that's what you need to do. Look, I think that the U.S. is going to get out of its group. I would even say win the group, given the realities of a 48 team World Cup being one of the the first pot as a host. So I think we're going to get a good group, a winnable group. And now you're in the round of 32, which is something no team has ever been in. You're going to get certainly a winnable game. And then you're right back where you started in that round of 16 game where, unless it's Mexico like it was in 2002, it's going to be a team that it's going to be pretty even. And so you're going to have to find a way to conjure something up that hasn't been kind of done before. And then you're in kind of, rarefied air. But, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Less than a year away, my friend.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Alexi, I appreciate it, my friend, for hopping on for a USMNT recap of the 2025 Gold Cup and, how we're feeling heading to 26. Guys, if you haven't already, make sure you check out his podcast, The State of the Union with Alexi Lalas. Him and David Mossy have great episodes. And they also have some great special guests occasionally. This summer, they had Carly Lloyd, Stu Holden, Marisa Dew, Landon Donovan. I mean, maybe I'm forgetting someone else, but great.
Yeah, we got some good people coming on, but David's awesome, David Mossy, and so we have a really good time. So thanks for checking that out.
Yeah, appreciate it, Lexi. Until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.